Together, the movie to test your relationship with or hit up on a first date to wonder, yeah, maybe I can get there with that individual. It's the horror movie that's been fused to my brain since I saw it all the way back in January, and it is finally available in theaters for you sickos to see. Now, before we get into it, I know there was a bunch of drama around this movie and a lawsuit. I will get to that and the evidence supporting this movie at the end of the video, but just know that there's plenty out there to support this movie and its origins, including when it was submitted to the WGA as a completed script and when the Australian government gave it an Australian film grant. Also, at least one of the plot details listed in that suit is just wrong. But this is a body horror movie that doesn't go too far on the gross scale. Like, this doesn't get anywhere near the level of The Substance if that was something that was a bit too much for you. I would consider this a really good ease into body horror. It's chilling, but still manages to stay light in the areas where it needs to, and it's the kind of horror that manages to work super effectively as a horror movie, but also a fantastic exploration of its themes of relationships, your identity in them, and codependency. Because the no spoiler premise of Together is that couple Tim and Millie move to the countryside where a series of unusual events start happening to them, pushing the limits of their relationship to the extreme as they each try to work through the nature of their identities within that relationship, hopefully reaching a point where they realize they can be better together, to put it lightly. And it really is firmly cementing its spot on those list of movies that might ruin your relationship if it's not meant to be, right alongside Midsummer. I can also imagine a new version of the worm-girlfriend dilemma in which couples start asking if their partners would do the together thing if it was real. You wouldn't do the together thing with me, you don't even love me. But this was just such a fantastic theatrical experience, and I felt it really held up. The story itself is incredibly personal to director Michael Shanks, who's been with his partner for 16 years and, like Tim in the movie, started to worry about losing himself and his ambitions to that relationship. Taking that idea of how people's lives become intertwined within relationships and then pushing it to the extreme. There's also a lot of fun lore around things happening within the movie, some of which I have a little bit of insider information on in the spoilers section. Nothing too major, but I got a chance to talk to director Michael Shanks as well as Alison Brie and Dave Franco, so we got a little bit of extra goodies at the end.
I know Dave Franco.
Awesome.
Great.
The atmosphere is genuinely creepy. The way things play out are really cool and unique in how it's expressed. And getting Dave and Alison on board with this, both as producers and the lead actors, really helped push this movie to the next level. They're actually married, so there's a real intimacy between them that absolutely contributes to this movie feeling all the more genuine. They also self-admittedly have what they call to be a healthy codependent relationship, which I think is just a healthy relationship. Good for them! I saw this with my ex when we were already exes, so I don't know what that says for me, but hey, I'm here for the ride. And while Brie and Franco didn't specifically influence the script and change much from Michael Shanks' vision, they did apparently soften Tim out quite a bit because his character was written from a place of Shanks' own self-loathing. The person he hopes he isn't but worries that he is, so they kind of had to soften him up a little bit so you could be like, there's reasons why this woman is with him. The marketing for this has also been fantastic. I was so happy when I saw that Neon picked this up out of Sundance because they have been crushing those marketing campaigns. But they're going all out. They had these missing posters at South by Southwest, which I nabbed after the movie played. We've got lube packets somewhere. They've got a proposal wedding competition going on right now, as well as couples therapy offerings for people who might be traumatized by the experience. Elevation Pictures, who's been repping it in Canada, were giving out handcuffs. Don't worry, pals, just still waiting for my pair to come in the mail because I obviously need that for my collection. It really has just been a blast to watch this ramping up out of the film festival circuit. So if you're looking for a fun body horror dealing with codependency and identity in relationships, get out there and see Together. But something I'd love to be together with is today's sponsor, Raycon's latest edition, the Essential Open Earbuds. The everyday earbuds, as I've mentioned, are fantastic. But sometimes you just don't want something inside your ear canal. I actually have friends who just refuse to wear earbuds entirely. But if you don't want to wear earbuds, that kind of leaves you with headphones, which you might not want to cart around everywhere, either because they take up too much space or feel too heavy duty for the errands you're running. And that's where these bad boys really come in handy. You're out for a walk or a run alone and you want to stay aware of your surroundings, or you're running errands or trying to pay attention to things around you in a cafe? With these, you won't need to worry about switching in and out of awareness mode or pulling them out of your ears if you need to talk. With the Essential Open Earbuds, you just quickly pop them on and go, keeping you fully engaged with the world around you while still getting to listen to your music. They're super lightweight, still deliver great sound, and give you that perfect in-between of the headphones and earbud experience with the comfort you expect from Raycon. They pass the sleep test, and I honestly just kind of forget they're on my ears most of the time. As I've mentioned, I've been trying to get out for a lot more walks and bike rides lately, but there are a lot of weird people out there and some creepy animals that can just sneak up on you, but not me. Not with these. They're also IPX5 splash proof, which means I don't have to worry about sweat or rain damaging them, and then they're super easy to clean up. And with 8 hours of battery life per charge, 36 hours with the case, wireless charging, these are a no-brainer to have with you on the go. So if you want to experience the freedom of Raycon's essential open earbuds, go to buyraycon.com/JediOpen to save 20% off your order. But diving on into those spoilers, this is your warning to see it in theaters. This is a big ol' spoiler section. The whole rest of the video is spoilers. Before we pick up with Tim and Millie, we get a fairly ominous scene in the woods, a glowing pit, this weird bell sinking into the ground with markings on it, a search and rescue mission for a couple that seems to have gone missing in that area where the dogs are the only ones to find that pit. Fun fact, the man of the missing couple is actually director Michael Shanks. The dogs then drink some of the water that's in that pit, leading them to just start staring at each other, completely frozen. Until later that night when they become some Cronenberg meets The Thing horror fusion of a body that just won't blend, giving us a pretty good idea of what's to come before, boom, we cut to New York with a going away party for Tim and Millie because she took on a new job as a teacher. And right from the jump, you can feel a little bit of the hostility here. She's pointing out that everyone thinks it's so cute that they're matching, so he immediately gets changed. This is a man who feels like he hasn't accomplished the things he wants to in life. He wants to be a career musician and might have a bit of resentment towards his relationship for not having achieved that yet. All while her friends are encouraging her to leave him because he's holding her back. And it is so interesting to see the way this relationship dynamic shifts throughout the movie from the reality of the situation, who's sacrificing what, and how that codependency is playing out, which we will get to. But first, she proposes to him at this party, which he was not expecting. She doesn't even have a ring, and oh my god, I want to crawl into myself and die. She is completely embarrassed because he hesitates entirely too long, leading to questions after the party like, do we even love each other, or are we just used to each other? Not anything you really want to hear from the person you're in a relationship with, but probably something a lot of people have thought of. But even with Tim seemingly putting all of his shortcomings on Millie, he clearly does have a lot of insecurities around that probably not being the case. He has nightmares of her saying that everyone in their life knows that he needs her more than she'd ever need him, that resenting her doesn't make him any less of a failure, which I just thought was a really great thing to add here. That even with him genuinely worrying about her holding him back, deep down he knows it's just something he's putting on her to make up for his own dissatisfaction in his life. The scene also gives us a little hint of trauma surrounding his parents, so we're getting a full-fledged story here. That also ties right into Shanks' own life and the death of his father, but it's never something that feels like it's unnecessarily added to inflate the story in a direction it shouldn't be going. It all feels like it fits very well. But then they're at the new place, starting the next stage of their life together, and along with some power tool foreshadowing, it is pretty stinky. Because there's some horrific rat king in their light fixture, also some foreshadowing there, because one of these things is still alive, but the smell reminds him of when his dad died and his mom just kind of snapped and kept sleeping next to the body, not even noticing the stench. She lost herself so severely that she couldn't even begin to function without her husband, which clearly plays into Tim's own reservations about the relationship he's in. Now outside settling into work where Millie makes quick friends with another teacher that ends up being their neighbor, her and Tim end up going on a nature hike, where Tim accidentally gets them lost in the rain until they start following these bells in the trees thinking they're path markers. But you will note that they are just smaller versions of that giant bell we saw at the beginning of the movie, leading them right to that same pit that Tim falls in and drags Millie down with him, and while she wants to get out immediately, he thinks they should just wait out the storm. And instead of just collecting rainwater with their bottles, they drink out of the water pit. You don't know what's going on down there or how still that water is. You could get some kind of brain-eating parasite. Some people might actually prefer the brain-eating amoeba to what happens. Now this whole cave is just ominous, other than being a cave. They don't know how deep the pit goes, but they say it feels crowded for some reason. There's pieces of what look like broken pews fused into the dirt. Wild shit under here. And while they're asleep, we hear a bunch of weird noises, breathing the vibe of something entering Tim, then silence, and as he breathes, these weird roots in the cave seem to be breathing along with him, until they wake up and realize that their legs started sticking together in their sleep. Yikes, that shit was ripped open. They just think it's some kind of like weird cave sticky stuff, but no. And it just gets more intense from here. He goes to shower when they get home after he kind of goes into this weird trance massaging her. And then his body just starts getting slammed around in the shower in whatever direction she's going, pushing harder and harder the further she gets away until she gets far enough to kind of like sever the connection. And I love this scene. I love the way they're setting this thing up, that it's not just purely physical. It is like physical in a full body way. So this is all pretty weird. He decides to go get checked out by a doctor because this isn't normal, but the doctor just can't get past the fact that his mother had like such severe mental illness and just gives him a Valium. Well, specifies that it's called diazepam now. Man, even the drugs in this movie are losing their identity. Fun tidbit here though is when Tim mentions where they had gone hiking, the doctor mentions that couple that went missing, and when Tim's looking them up later, he starts to worry about the legacy he'd leave behind if they also went missing. How sad those last Facebook posts might look to people that fled your page before he realizes that Millie also recently made one of those cringe posts about their move. The dynamic here is just working on so many layers. She just doesn't care what other people think because she's secure in herself in the relationship, and he is just so worried about it. And while Tim really hasn't been making his way out of the house to meet people, that neighbor and coworker does come over to introduce himself. His name is Jamie. He stays for dinner, and they start telling him about their experience in the pit cave, how there were bells and church pews in the walls. And Jamie here casually mentions that he thinks there used to be a church out there, but it collapsed, and over the years, the members just kind of started thinning out. Ooh, no time to really dwell there though, because couple drama, which you just love to happen in front of the new neighbors. And even with him saying he feels trapped, Jamie still says, hey, it seems like you guys complete each other. And he doesn't even say it in a way that feels like he's trying to smooth over any tensions. It actually seemed earnest, but Tim still thinks he's into Millie, which is also interesting because he's super jealous of this guy moving in on Millie while saying he feels like a hostage. And this is where things start getting weird again. It's like his whole body gets pulled into Millie, they start kissing, then their lips get stuck together, so she thinks he bit her and is like, I don't know what you want from me, we have no intimacy, and now suddenly you're throwing yourself at me, and then this happens, like, I don't know what's going on anymore. And he's like, no, I swear to God, I did not bite you. I don't know what just happened. And then they go to sleep and she wakes up thinking that he's like rolling over on her hair to pull it. And then when she turns over, it's actually just going down his throat. God, the practical effects go hard in this. They had to build like another Dave Franco head to do this because it was one of the only stunts that would have been like way too hard to actually try to get him to do to even fake it. But now at least she's willing to admit that something more serious is going on than just like typical him not doing well and not adjusting. And she wants him to stay home because there's clearly something wrong with him, but he is just so set on playing guitar in her brother's band and actually getting a chance to play shows and maybe getting his shot that he insists on going, but then he immediately starts to get sick waiting for the train as she's driving away. Again, starting to make it seem like he's the one who's just entirely overly codependent on her, even though he was trying to push away so hard before. If we start flipping, things start to flip. So he doesn't get on the train and he wanders to her work, which again is an elementary school, looking completely strung out while she drags him into a bathroom and he starts making moves on her. I do like the way he basically describes it as his full body thirsting for her when she's not around, but you know, that is a very quick way to get two people on an offender's registry. But of course, the worst thing starts to happen. Guess what body parts start to fuse together? It's their genitals. Yeah. Now, when I saw this in January, I was genuinely worried that it was gonna like rip him off, but thankfully they do manage to get unstuck just in time to stop Jamie from catching them. Now, the fallout from this moment and everything building into it is basically Millie realizing how little Tim's been putting into the relationship, pointing out how much she's sacrificed over the years playing it safe so he could take the risks in his career, and now he seems to be punishing her for it. And this is where you start feeling that full shift in codependency happening. Tim is literally physically dependent on her right now, realizing how much he's kind of messed up, while she's starting to realize that she might not actually need him in his current iteration. He ends up saying, I wish I could be what either of us wants me to be, but I think she was just expecting the bare minimum from a partner. To not be so incredibly mopey and blame her for the fact that he didn't achieve the things he set out to. So she ends up going to Jamie's to try to smooth over the bathroom incident because he might have seen something in his house as one of those bells. Cult. At least I assumed it did. She dongs some kind of bell when she gets there and later on it'll actually show it. Here we're just given the impression that his partner passed away, but she's looking at a picture of both of them and Jamie looks like a combination. So I'm guessing he fused with his lover and now he's trying to encourage them to do the same. Without specifically saying that out loud, he does mention the myth of Zeus with people doomed to find their other halves. Literally a myth about him physically splitting them in two. Ooh, we're having fun, but even on an emotional level here, Jamie's talking about how people we love are worth working for and not giving up so soon, and that a lot of the things you think are problems within the relationship are just your own insecurities that you can't get past. And just before he has time to show her his wedding video, which I feel is gonna be wacky, she catches Tim spying on them from the trees. And this is played for a great bit. It like cuts over to him and then zooms zooms in. It was so funny. But through all of her annoyance, this is when Millie's gonna start experiencing her side effects. While he's up late doing work, noticing that you can see the same bell in some of the last pictures the missing couple took, then realizing that the geolocation on those pictures placed them in the exact same place they got lost in that cave, Millie ends up doing this creepy walk run and just slamming into the studio doors. Literally starts to lift off the ground the taller that Tim stands, bringing him to the conclusion that the more tired they are, the more the body can take over and do whatever it's doing. She's not fully on board though, still pretty upset with him and wants him to sleep in the spare room, and he's like, yes, absolutely, we need to stay apart, totally not realizing that it's because she doesn't want to be anywhere near him right now. And this moment kind of makes it feel like she's planning on ending things with him at this point. She doesn't want him coming to dinner with her parents. She says she doesn't want him, all while her blood has been on the table moving towards Tim. It's an incredible touch here. It is literally every piece of them on a cellular level is trying to latch on to the other. Which brings us to the hallway scene where their bodies are literally dragging themselves to each other and just contorting around. I got a chance to ask Michael Shanks about the specifics here, and they did have contortionists on set, but Alison tried to do a lot of these movements herself to make it a little bit easier on the face replacement part of things, and I guess got pretty close to some of those movements that she did better than people would have thought. Not to take away from the stunt double who absolutely did the bulk of the work here, but I appreciate someone being willing to try doing crazy things like that. And the second they touch, their hands completely start to fuse, and taking his diazepam is the only thing that stops it as they push themselves out of one another. Something about the muscle relaxants helps it stop. Except he ends up knocked out from this, leading to the scene, the chair scene in the kitchen, and her having to separate them with a power tool.
Whiskey for the pain.
And it's actually really funny because she's trying to get him to calm down, but she feels the whiskey as it's hitting him. Now, she does manage to separate them. They really don't show it, so don't worry about that, but they have very different plans on how they want to deal with this. She wants to go to a doctor and say separate, while he wants to go back to the cave for answers. Which he does against her wishes and notices more of the church stuff above and these weird images, and then comes across the missing couple who fought the fusion are just now this monstrous blob thing begging for help because they haven't been able to take themselves out. Spooky! Cut to Millie, who realizes she forgot her car keys at Jamie's, where he's watching that wedding video he mentioned, which is less of a wedding video and much more of a cult religious ceremony while the church was still above ground, filled with art-fused people, because this ceremony is really just the fusion process, which is when Jamie pops out and slashes her arm to speed up the process of that happening with her and Tim. So I think that's super cool. I think they introduced just enough lore and imagery with the cult to give people a solid idea of what was happening there, but also leaving room for fun theories. But I was actually able to ask Shanks about it because I love lore, and he described the pit as this kind of eldritch ancient power that was almost working like a digestive tract or a stomach, just sucking things into it, which is what happened to the church. And the one shot they didn't end up having the budget for was that they wanted an overhead shot that would have shown all the trees and the grass in the area kind of bending towards the cave as if they were also being sucked in. So at some point people discovered this, the effects of the water, and built an entire religion around it. Super fun! Shanks also shouted out Bring Her Back by fellow Australians who did a great job with some cult vibes this year, and both of them have the same prosthetic designer. Good job, Australians! It is a neat moment here. After he cuts her, she scratches his face, which starts to almost unfuse things, and you can start hearing both the voices inside Jamie. Now with Tim seeing what is probably the worst case scenario of the fusion, realizes the only way to save Millie would be to kill himself. But first he recreates that ringless proposal to her, finally realizing that he knows he was miserable and incomplete before they got together, that she was the dream and he just couldn't get out of his own way to realize it. Problem being, Millie's already dying, so she's okay letting that happen so he can live. And damn, that girl really is just giving up everything for this guy. So as she's passing out from blood loss, he realizes he doesn't want to live in a world without her and can't make her sacrifice more of her own life for him, and lets that fusion start. And to mark the occasion, he pops on her favorite Spice Girls album, the one he bought on their first date, which is of course To Become One. How could they not? From the album Spice, that was actually one of the incorrect details in the lawsuit. The people accusing Together of plagiarism apparently make a mistake in their movie where they play that song but show that it's on the album Spice World. But Together shows and mentions that the album is specifically Spice, so they got it right. That's just a wrong detail in the lawsuit. But this is just a great scene where they're coming together while they're dancing. A lot of it is creepy as hell and makes for terrifying visuals, but it's also supposed to be this beautiful moment overall. They're just fully giving themselves over to one another. I'm not saying in reality this would be a healthy thing, but metaphorically it's two people realizing that they can be stronger together. And that's a beautiful thing. It looks pretty horrifying going into that final stage, but beautiful thing. Now, the fun part is that her parents were still coming over for dinner the next day. They see all the blood in the driveway, and then the door opens to reveal this very androgynous fusion of the two of them, equipped with the new doorbell. Cult Bell. And that's the movie, not quite as mixed as the Midsummer ending where everyone's like, good for you, girl. And it's actually like, she's gonna be a baby making machine for a cult. She's been brainwashed by a cult. There's maybe a little bit of that in here, but I think overall it's supposed to be for positive reasons. And I think this movie is really gonna speak to a lot of people, maybe help relationships. I've felt like a Tim and Emily at different points in my life, and I think I'm better for having seen this movie all around, which is such a weird thing to say about a movie like this. But there's just an authenticity that is bringing to the table that it makes perfect sense that Shanks has couples coming up to him after screening saying they think this might end the relationship or help it. That's why Neon's offering therapy. But right at the end of the interview, I asked him if he had any advice for people who might be worried about losing pieces of themselves to a relationship.
I'm absolutely not a relationship expert, but the best advice that I think I can muster is the more honest and open you are with the person that you're in love with, I think that better things will happen.
But touching on the authenticity I mentioned before, let's talk a little bit about the lawsuit. So again, the script was submitted to the WGA in 2019, then received funding from Screen Australia to further develop it in 2020. He was then talking to Dave Franco about a completely different movie before the two started talking horror and realized that this might be a significantly better project for them because Dave really wanted to do it specifically with Alison.
So he sent me the script for Together, and I just remember reading it, and you know, all of the set pieces, I was just like, this is some of the most innovative shit I've ever read. And yes. I turned to Alison and I was like, I think we should do this one together because I figured our real life relationship could lend itself well to the characters in the film who have been together for over 10 years. And hopefully when you're watching us on screen, you can kind of feel our real history and like it adds kind of weight to the relationship for the characters.
Now, because it's physically impossible to see the movie that's claiming Together ripped it off, which is called Better Half, it premiered at one film festival back in 2023. I don't think it got picked up for distribution. I can't find a way to watch it legally. I can't even find a way to watch it illegally. But it means I can't directly speak to a lot of the similarities, but the idea of two people fusing together isn't strictly unique, and tonally they're completely different, and the setups are also completely different. You can tell that just from reading the descriptions. And as mentioned, one of the things they listed in the lawsuit that a lot of people thought was the biggest smoking gun with the Spice Girls mistake, that didn't happen. They were wrong about that. To me, the thing that seems the weirdest is that Better Half was apparently pitched to Dave Franco for him and Alison, but then their agent said that they turned it down like immediately the next day. But again, that would have been sent to them after Michael Shanks already submitted his script to the WGA. So I don't even think either of them necessarily looked at that script before they turned it down. And I know it's got Alison Brie and Dave Franco and Neon backing it right now, but both of these movies are independent. Shanks just lucked out and got Dave and Alison. And again, Together is a horror movie about codependency, and Better Half seems to be a rom-com about a one-night stand gone wrong. Again, I will always leave room for some kind of smoking gun to come out, but there is a paper trail backing Michael Shanks, and the events of his actual life, including the trauma around his father, are deeply ingrained into the story. So there might be some similarities, but I do fundamentally think that these are different movies and both can exist in the space. But that's going to do it for the video. Let me know if any of you guys caught Together, what you thought. Did it push you into a relationship crisis, or are you like ready to take that plunge? Let me know. But thank you all so much for watching. Thanks as always to my Patreon supporters and YouTube channel members. Subscribe to the channel if you're new, leave a like in the video if you're into that kind of thing. All my other social medias are listed down below. I hope you're all having a fantastic day. I'm mostly okay, and we'll catch you all later.